or maybe you're the lucky one who never experienced period cramping. Say hi if you exist. If you had this symptom, there is a baby in your belly. This is not implantation bleeding. When you know you're pregnant before you're big fat positive. Hey girls, today's video is a very exciting one, and I decided to make this separate particular video about just implantation signs, because I know that many of you who are trying to conceive, just like me a few years ago, search exactly that. Signs of implantation, because when you know that implantation happened, that's when you know you're pregnant before you're big fat positive, and that's when you can potentially take an early test and see that line. So let me share with you my implantation symptoms I had the first time around, because I was lucky enough to have them the first time around. That's when I was 90% sure I was pregnant, and I still had 1 week until taking the test. I'm not so lucky to don't really have them the second time around, so we're gonna concentrate just on that. But I do have full videos about all the 2-week wait symptoms with my first and with my second. I will link them down below. And in case you're new here, my name is Karyna. I'm a mom to 2 babies, my baby girl, not a baby anymore, and going to be 4 years old in a couple of months, and my son is 15 months old. So here on my channel I share lots of motherhood content. I also do homemaking content, and I post videos every Thursday, so make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified. So let's go. What were those implantation signs? There are 2 very particular and very much for sure signs that the egg is about to implantate and is implanting. And the first one is mild cramps in your lower abdomen, usually on one side. They feel kind of like your period cramping, or maybe ovulation cramping as well. You might have experienced that before, or maybe you're the lucky one who never experienced period cramping, which let me know in the comments below if you exist. Say hi. So most of us know how period cramping feels like on the one side, because the egg that was fertilized in one of your fallopian tubes, either on the right or on the left, will be moving through the tube in order to get to the uterus to implantate in there. So with my first, I started feeling the implantation cramping at around 8 and 10 days DPO. First day it was for like an hour, so it was really noticeable, and then here and there for the next couple of days. And then after that I've got the second symptom that told me for sure that I'm pregnant: implantation bleeding. So how does implantation bleeding look? Because it's so easy to get confused and think that your regular spotting, or maybe not regular, but just the spotting before your period, is implantation bleeding. And this happened to me even after I've been through a pregnancy. My second time around, when we were trying to conceive, for the first months I was convinced I was pregnant, and I even had the spotting that I usually don't have before period, and I was hoping it was implantation bleeding, but it was not. And there was one very clear sign that it was not implantation bleeding, and I didn't want to believe that, but you should know. If you're spotting first reddish, bright red, it's not implantation bleeding. And if it increases, and if it becomes heavier, or you wet a panty liner, this is not implantation bleeding. Implantation bleeding is a barely pink or brown discharge at around 10-12 days DPO. That's when it happened to me, at least. DPO stands for days post-ovulation, in case you're new to this world. And if you know when you ovulated, that will help you to determine much faster and much better when you should take a test and whether your symptoms are implantation symptoms or not. But if you don't know when you ovulated, you most probably know when your last period started, and you might know your usual cycle length. Ovulation usually happens in the middle of the cycle, so anywhere from day 14 to 16. I know it's broad, but this is at least some information for you, because unfortunately so many of us are undereducated on this topic of our bodies and our cycles. So there is that side note. It's a very small amount. Often it's mixed with your like mucus discharge that you usually get at this time of the cycle. Sometimes it's hard to notice it, but if you're looking for it, you're gonna notice it. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen to all of us, and it doesn't even happen every single time you get pregnant. Like I said, with my second, I did not have any implantation bleeding, or at least maybe I didn't notice it, because it can really be that tiny. Why is it happening? Because the eggs that already travel to your uterus is implanting into the lining, and of course, because it's, you know, like digging in, there can be a tiny bleeding, and by the time it actually goes down, the blood gets brownish because it's, you know, old blood, or again, because it's not your bright red period that is flowing, it can also be pinkish. That's the first thing Google tells you when you Google implantation bleeding, that it has to be brown or pink, so watch out for that. Another detail, I experienced that implantation bleeding or implantation spotting every day a little bit for like 5 days, and I got my first positive on the 4th day after I saw this spotting for the first time, about 4 days before my missed period. It was a barely noticeable line, but it was there. If you had these symptoms, or at least one of these symptoms, I think you can try and take a test. Better and very sensitive one, an early response one, so you make sure you can see that line, because that's when pregnancy starts, and when the hormone of pregnancy starts producing, when the fertilized egg travels from fallopian tube into your uterus and implanted in there. That's the start of the pregnancy, speaking medically, which for me personally, I think life began at the point where the sperm met the egg. But you see, there is like a way they have to go to implant, and that's when you consider carrying a baby. But most importantly, that's when you can detect the pregnancy, and that's when that hormone that tests are checking for starts to produce. It might take a little while for tests to determine it. Try the early responses, some other very sensitive tests, or just wait a couple of more days, because most probably if you had these symptoms, there is a baby in your belly. So congratulations, and I wish you luck. If this video was helpful, make sure to give it a like. Check out my full 2-week wait symptoms. I have quite a few very good and important symptoms there. I was feeling very sad, like even depressed, lower backache, hot flushes, and I will see you in one of these videos.